Right, I'm going to start with you, Peter. What did you like about the Queen's speech? Anything?
One or two little bits. I mean, I don't support Boris Johnson. I think he's unfit to be Prime Minister. But to pick up on one thing we've touched on, there is a climate crisis, and I'm really in favour of peaceful protests. But I do have a concern about the more extreme elements of climate protesters blocking ambulances on public highways. I think that's unacceptable. And I think if anyone had lost their mother or father to a heart attack because an ambulance has been delayed, they'd be rightly horrified at some of these tactics. There is a climate crisis, and I do want to see protests. But if the government is doing something about the blocking of the road, that is something that would help ordinary people all around the country just when they need it.
And Joanne, what were your favourite little bits and bobs that you spotted in the Queen's speech?
Well, I think, I agree with you that a lot of the rhetoric and the direction of travel is absolutely what we should be hearing from a Conservative government. But I've tried to look into some of the detail, and I was quite pleased to see that there's going to be more of an emphasis on safeguarding in the schools bill on those children that have fallen off the school registers. And we've heard quite a lot about those, obviously, over the COVID period particularly. And I was also quite pleased to see that the social housing regulator is going to have some beefed up powers to make sure that people in social housing can see sort of earlier resolution of any disputes they have. And that's, I think, in the aftermath of what happened at Grenfell.
Now, Peter, I think we've been far too positive so far, so let's turn it down a bit. Let me know what you didn't like or what you thought was evidently absent from what the government should be proposing.
Well, I'll try and be balanced, and I know viewers might not always want party political tub thumping, but I'll give you two things I would have liked to have seen there, because this is not at all a Queen's speech for the cost of living crisis. First of all, there's that flagship Labour policy of a one-off windfall tax on oil and gas producers that would put money into every household's energy bill. The other thing that perhaps Labour have talked about a little bit less in recent weeks, but it's still very important, and I see as quite a left-wing policy, is what about house building? What have we heard today that's going to stimulate house building? We all know that it's much more expensive to buy a home, and it's much more expensive to rent a home. And the reason for that is lack of supply. And I look back very briefly, the last Labour government before the financial crisis was building around 50 or 60,000 homes every quarter. The level under the coalition and then Tory government has got nowhere near that. It's been much like 40 or 50,000 homes per quarter. So I'd like to see incentives for the house building sector, particularly those smaller firms, because SMEs are the lifeblood of the economy, as we all know. And then more houses means more affordable houses.
And Joanne, were there any clangers or some sort of big things that the Conservative government aren't proposing that you think they should be?
Yes, well, I mean, I return to my opening comments on safeguarding. I'd like to see something in the schools bill that looks far more closely at either regulating or controlling in some way those kind of agencies and consultancies that set themselves up in the name of PSHE and relationship and sex education. They're going into school and actually they're a cloak for some pretty extreme ideologies on race and gender and things like that. And I think that's a whole sector that needs a lot closer sort of either, if not regulation, then certainly scrutiny by schools with the help of the government. And I think picking up a little bit from what Peter was saying on housing, it's a small thing, but it could make a slight difference. I'd like to see some tax incentives for people to rent out their spare rooms. At the moment, you're quite limited in what you can earn from having lodgers, and I think that should be tax exempt.